Hello everyone, this is part 9 of What If Naruto was in Anbu at 6, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Naruto watched with a bored gaze as Giniko and Hayit fought the remaining 5 Anbu, 3 lay dead at their feet. They fought back to back, not allowing their Anbu counterparts to separate them too much. The Mizukage watched with thinly veiled glee as the two began to tire, as was shown by heavy breathing and sloppier attacks. They both had excellent teamwork, he acknowledged. No doubt what had gotten them this far, but still, they wouldn't last much longer. Once they fell, he would step in, defeat this weakling of a cage and seize Kiri as he meant to do so. Finally, one Anbu broke the melee and leapt back, forming his hand seals. He called out his jutsu. Suten, Suryuden, he yelled as he blew out a stream of water which quickly formed into the water dragon. Giniko and Hayit snapped their heads in its direction. Acting on instinct, the two leapt in the first direction their legs took them, away from each other. The attack had worked. As soon as they hit the ground, the two realized their mistake and tried to reach each other, only to have the 5 Anbu block their path. Giniko cursed. They had wanted to avoid this for 2 reasons. The first is because now they were separated, making it easier for the enemy to surround them, therefore kill them, and second is because in order to avoid them getting surrounded they would have to use jutsu, not something you wanted to do if you had to face the cage of a nation right after. The only female member of the 7 swordsmen cursed as she was forced to leap back again due to various explosive tags being thrown at her feet. When she landed again, she formed her hand seals without ever releasing her sword before she swung, dragging the tip of the blade on the ground. Raten, Doki no Ten. Yellow streaks of lightning exploded from the attack, snaking through the earth, leaving a jagged trench as it released electricity everywhere. One of the Anbu formed his hand seals. Suten, Suijinheki, he yelled, slamming his hands on the earth, letting the lightning streaks hit it. The lightning was naturally drawn to the water, reducing the attack to barely nothing when it reached them. Giniko narrowed her eyes as 2 of the Anbu charged her, their 2 blades glinting in the light. Fools trying to beat one of the 7 swordsmen in Kenjutsu. She thought, somewhat insulted as she took up her stance. She backpedaled as she blocked the first and second strikes, merely diverting their attacks. When she had led the 2 on enough so that they fell into a subconscious state of believing she would merely divert their attacks, she dug her heels in harshly. This time she didn't divert the attack, she blocked both completely, knocking them both off balance as they stumbled slightly. She did a quick roundhouse kick, nailing the first one in the face as she continued the motion by smoothly slicing the other's chest armor. She had aimed for his neck, but he had managed to recover quicker than what was anticipated and leaned back, avoiding the deadly blade, somewhat. She snarled as she went to start her hand seals again when she heard a scream behind her that made her blood run cold. She snapped her head in the direction of the scream and saw Hayit, with a kunai jabbed into his right side, most likely where the kidneys were. Behind him, holding the knife, was none other than the Mizukage, wearing a cruel smirk as he shrugged innocently. I got bored. She felt her anger rise as she grit her teeth hard and rushed at him. The 2 Anbu behind her ran to catch up, while the 2 in front of her moved to intercept her path. Raten, Chuseki no Doki. She yelled as she crossed her arms in front of her. Lightning encased her form, making her look like a comet running along the ground. The 2 Anbu leapt over her to avoid being hit by the jutsu. She dispelled it once she saw her path was clear and leapt up as she raised her sword, lightning dancing and crackling around it. If you attack me, you'll kill him too. The Mizukage yelled out to her. Her eyes narrowed and grew cold as she swung anyway, the streaks of lightning flying from her sword to the ground below like a shower of electricity. The Mizukage leapt away as the lightning fell. To his surprise, the lightning fell around Hayit and the location where he himself would have been. It appears she had been bluffing. Before he could do anything, Giniko landed near Hayit, picked him up and leapt through the trees, vanishing into their shadows. After her, he barked. Don't you dare let her escape. He yelled angrily. His Anbu nodded before they rushed after the female swordsmen. Naruto watched as she ran before he silently followed, always in the shadows. Come on, damn it, don't you dare die on me, you hear me, you worthless moron. Giniko said as she carefully examined the injury. It was deep, very deep. It spurted blood every few seconds and truly looked fatal. He chuckled, ignoring the blood that rose into his mouth. You seem awfully worried over this worthless moron, he said, chuckling before he coughed lightly. Just shut up, she said as she rummaged through her pouch for her first aid equipment. He halted her search as he placed a hand on her wrist. She looked to him surprised before he waved her off. Don't act foolish, Giniko, my time's up, we both know it. Get out of here while you still can. She growled angrily as she continued rummaging through her pack. You're a moron, a delirious one at that, so just shut up and let me work. He grabbed her wrist again, stopping her. Giniko, please, he whispered hoarsely. She stopped in her attempts. She bit her lip hard as she forced the tears back. Naruto watched the scene from above, his speed and greater sense of smell making it very easy for him to find the two before their pursuers. She sighed in agitation, masking the pain she felt for her dying friend. Damn you, she whispered harshly. Hayit smiled at her harsh tone. Promise me one thing, Giniko. What's that question mark? She asked, her voice going softer as she closed her eyes. Promise me that you'll live beyond this day. So, he paused as he coughed blood, that you can fulfill our dream. Since I won't be able to help you. She smiled softly down at him. You're still hooked up on that dream of yours. Ever since Sensei put it in your head. He smiled and nodded. Damn straight, he said, coughing more blood as he slowly moved his hand to grasp her own. Naruto watched the display with cold apathy. Not even fazed by the man's dying words and increasingly laboring breath. He sensed the presence of the Anbu approaching. Soon, it would all be over. Promise me, Giniko, promise me that you'll live and bring peace to Kiri. Bring peace to our land. Naruto stopped, taken aback by the request, remembering the Sandaim's last words to be almost the exact same thing. Did this man and Sarutobi share the same dream? He was brought out of his musings as the stinging smell of salt reached his nose. He looked down to Ginchiko's silently shaking form. She was struggling to hold back the tears. It was then he noticed that Hayit was no longer in the world of the living. She was a good kunoichi, Naruto conceded as she took steady breaths in order to calm her emotions, recognizing that now was not the time for it. Naruto was so wrapped up in his thoughts that he didn't even see the kunai that approached her until it was too late. Judging by her scream of pain, neither did she. The blade hit her left shoulder. Blood seeped from the wound freely as she pulled the weapon out with a grunt of pain. Naruto debated whether or not he should interfere. In the end, he decided to hold his position for a while longer. Ginchiko stood, holding her injured shoulder as she turned and glared at her attackers, the Mizukage and his 5 remaining Anbu. How careless of you, Ginchiko, I merely intended that to be a warning shot. She cursed as she threw the bloodied knife at him. He caught it between his thumb and forefinger easily as he smiled down at her, savoring this moment for all it was worth. Kill her, he said simply, and the Anbu at his side immediately sprung into action. She held her sword in a defensive stance as best she could with her injured shoulder. Hayit, I can't promise I'll live beyond this day, but, she paused as she looked up to the Mizukage's smug face. Maybe killing him will make your dream of a peaceful Kiri a reality, she said with hints of determination in her voice. Naruto watched her. Something about her stance had changed. Whereas before there was defiance, anger and a bit of fear, now there was only resolve and acceptance. Of what? Her death perhaps? Then what was the resolve he sensed? The desire to take them with her? He let his eyes travel to the still form of Hayit. The man simply lay there, his expression, one of peace, yet also an underlying sadness in his features. Does she fight for him perhaps, to fulfill your last request? Just as I fight to fulfill Sarutobi-sama's final command? He again let his eyes travel to the Kiri kunoichi. Or is it something else? He was brought out of his musings as Ginchiko began to glow bright yellow. Then electricity cut through the air around her form, encasing her in a high-voltage field of chakra. This technique, she is consuming her bioelectric energy. If she keeps this up, she will most certainly die soon. Ginchiko glared at her attackers, the Anbu having ceased their charge at the sight of her technique. For a moment, all was still until one of the Anbu took the initiative and formed his hand seals. Suten, Suiruden no Jutsu. He yelled as he gathered the moisture from the surrounding mist. Using water against lightning was always dangerous. It had a 50-50 chance that it would work or backfire terribly. It all depended on which attack held more chakra. When the dragon hit the field of electrical chakra, it simply exploded, scattering the small droplets of water everywhere. Giniko used the minor distraction and shot forward, her lightning-encased form appearing as nothing more than a yellow streak as she headed straight for the Mizukage. Doten, Deruheiki, another Anbu yelled as he slammed his hands onto the ground. A wall of solid rock came between her and the Mizukage. She didn't stop, and simply tore through it like a wrecking ball through a building. She kept moving, her gaze set determinedly onto her target. The Mizukage sneered as she neared him. The high voltage seeped into the air, making his skin tingle and his fingertips sting. He began forming his hand seals. Attack! Destroy her now! He yelled out his order, causing his bodyguards to form their own hand seals as they flanked him. Naruto watched as earth, fire, lightning and water techniques were launched at the charging woman in rapid succession. They each seemed to bounce off the field of electrical energy as she charged straight through them. To most, she appeared unstoppable. But Naruto could see and smell traces of charred flesh, hear the snapping of bones and the tearing of muscle and tissue. For a brief moment her charge faltered, before she pushed through with even more vigor. Why? He wondered as he continued to stare. What is it that makes you fight so hard? Is it Hidetada? Or perhaps you are the same as those others? He mused to himself. You took his place. Why? Haku coughed up blood, staining the gray floor of the bridge red. Because, he rasped out. He is someone I would protect, at any cost. Even your own life? Haku nodded, and smiled at the taller blonde. Why? The feminine boy let out a small laugh. You'll have to learn for yourself. That was the first time he had ever seen something of that nature, and it confused him still. What was it that compelled that Kiri Nin to surrender his own life for Zabuza? Kill me instead. He remembered the girl from Suna. She had cried out to him, begging for him to spare her brother. Even offering herself in his place, practically throwing herself in front of his blade. What was it about these individuals? What gave them such drive to simply surrender their lives heedlessly? He let his eyes travel to Hidetada again. What causes these people to do this? Meanwhile, the Mizukage and his Anbu had just finished another volley of jutsu, and still Ginchiko's charge didn't stop. The Mizukage glowered and was about to leap up in order to get out of the way, but nearly lost his balance as his legs kept themselves firmly planted on the ground. What the? I can't move? But how did she? He paused in his thoughts as looked to his feet, seeing many small electric strings holding him in place. But how? No one can manipulate lightning to such an extent. How did she? He paused as he realized that the lightning was coming from small water droplets, the droplets that had spread around the area from the water dragon used earlier against her. She was using the small reserves of her chakra in the droplets to manipulate the lightning now holding him in place. It wouldn't hold long, but long enough for her to reach him. His Anbu leapt out of the way, not noticing that their leader was stuck, leaving him alone. He made a move to form more hand seals, but it was too late. She picked up speed. The ball of lightning slammed right into him. He barely had enough time to scream before he was engulfed in the ensuing blast. Naruto and the Anbu each covered their eyes from the bright light and braced against the harsh winds. When it finally died down, the sight that greeted them was a burnt, very dead Mizukage. Ginchiko stood over him. Her arms and legs were damaged badly, blood seeped from her mouth, indicating internal bleeding. Her heartbeat was erratic at times, beating dangerously slow and then speeding up dramatically. Her entire body was twitching badly as she fell to her knees and threw up. Vomit and blood mixed as her sword fell to the floor with a dull clattering sound. All the while Naruto observed, his gaze focused intently on her. He suddenly caught the smell of salt. She was crying, possibly from regret that she did not try to escape, or that she was dying, he expected. But what she said next surprised him. At least, I managed to keep part of my promise. I'm sorry, Hidetada. Her thoughts slowed as she collapsed on her side, her breathing becoming shallower and shallower as her heart suddenly stopped. She had used up so much bioelectricity that her brain could no longer send messages to her body enough to keep her conscious. But Naruto could see from his perch that her features were not sad or angry, but rather happy. She was smiling, despite everything and even the pain she must be in, she was still smiling. What causes you to smile this way, Giniko? What is it that allows you to do so? The remaining Anbu leapt down, the captain of the group approaching with his sword ready to make sure she was dead. He raised his sword, but that's about as far as he got before his head was neatly chopped off and the woman vanished. The other Anbu tensed and turned as they sensed a presence. They found Naruto standing there, one hand holding his blade while the other held Giniko under one arm. Leave now, and I will spare your lives. Each of the Anbu spared each other a glance before they decided to simply cut their losses and leave. Naruto lowered his blade and spared a glance at the woman slung under his shoulder before he set her down on the floor. She lay on her back as Naruto placed his hand over her chest. He closed his eyes and focused for a moment. This was one of the few medical techniques that he knew. He usually just used it to preserve the life of a prisoner. He realized with some small sense of irony that this was the first time he would use it to save a life just for the sake of saving it. He sent a jolt through her system, trying to jump-start her heart again. He sensed no change in her pulse, so he did it again. Again nothing. He did it a third time and heard her pulse. He listened for a moment and heard her breathing. It was shallow and unsteady. If she was to survive, then he had to get her to the medics. With this thought in mind, Naruto sheathed his blade, picked her up and rushed back to camp. It was several hours later that the demon of Konoha found himself waiting in front of a medic tent, where they were currently treating the woman he had saved. He didn't even know why he saved her. Was it curiosity? Was it because her death would have been a waste? He didn't know really, but he had saved her, and yet, as he continued to replay the events over and over in his mind, a dull ache grew in his chest. The tent parted, revealing one of the Kiri medics as she wiped her brow. She'll be fine, but will have to stay in bed for several weeks before she can do any strenuous action. Naruto nodded. Very well. Inform me when she wakes. The woman nodded and bowed before she went to her other duties. Naruto looked to the setting sun. Its dull orange hue setting the sky ablaze with its light. He turned and left. He needed to think. Kakashi looked over the battlefield. Many ninja lay dead or dying, some groaning in pain while others cried in agony. A relief force had arrived. Earlier, they were meant to be used as backup in case things went wrong, but now they were in charge of mop-up. The Kiri ninja walked around, trying to find survivors from either side. Various cries calling for medics could also be heard among the chaos. He sighed. This is war. He mumbled to himself as he rubbed his covered Sharingan. I had almost forgotten what it was like. He muttered as he looked to the sky. I guess I'll have plenty of time to get used to it again. He sighed again as he turned to leave, but stopped as he caught sight of Naruto, walking among the bodies as he too surveyed the battleground. He stared curiously as Naruto just walked past and entered the forest, seemingly unfazed by the gruesome display before him. He sighed and looked to the setting sun. Minato-sensei, I wonder what you would do? Naruto stopped at the edge of the clearing. Hayit lay there, in the same place as before. His blood pooled around him, coating the grass a deep shade of brown. He walked over to him and simply stared at his still form. The ache in his chest grew almost uncomfortably. He placed a hand over his chest and wondered what it was. It is called guilt, Naruto-sama. Naruto turned to the voice and found the Aberrane clan head as he emerged from the forest. The blonde was only slightly surprised at his presence there. But then his words caught up to him. Guilt, you say? And just why should I feel guilty over his death? Shibi? He questioned. His voice a slow bored drawl. Leaving both him and Giniko alive was simply too dangerous. I did what I had to do. Shibi adjusted his glasses and nodded. Yes, you did, Naruto-sama. You did everything that you were supposed to do. But, you still feel guilty, and naturally so. Naturally so? The blonde questioned. Shibi walked around the clearing, his hands clasped behind him. Naruto-sama, you are a person that has dealt death, your hands are stained with blood and much of it, but you do not understand it. He paused as he turned to look at the boy. Today, you witnessed what death truly is. You saw her suffering, not just the fear, or the anger you have normally witnessed, but her true suffering. Naruto's eyes narrowed. I suggest, Shibi, that you keep your insects off of me. He warned, quickly deducing the source of the man's knowledge. Did you know? Shibi ignored him as he continued speaking. That after the Great Shinobi War, Sarutobi and Yondaime-sama were in the perfect position to take full control of Iwa? Do you know why they did not seize that opportunity? Naruto said nothing as he listened. Because neither of them wished to bear the weight of that guilt. Conquering Iwa would only bring destruction, it would only bring more sorrow, and neither of them wanted to bear that burden. He paused as he turned to face the blonde. You merely feel the beginning of that burden. Are you sure you wish to shoulder this thing that will undoubtedly become only all the greater? Even to one such as yourself, with this undertaking, Naruto-sama? Naruto listened, and thought over what was just said to him. He squared his shoulders as he formed his hand seals. Kaiten Gokaku, he whispered before he breathed a stream of flame, incinerating the Kiri Junin. He stared at the flames for a long while, listening to the cracks and losing himself in the glow. He looked to the Aberrane clan head. This is a land at war, a world where demons fight. If I must become a demon to end the chaos, then a demon is what I swear to be, and I will shoulder whatever burden that comes with it. He spoke with determination before he turned and left. If I must, then I alone will shoulder the sorrow. Ginchiko groaned as she blearily opened her eyes. The bright lights of the hospital room pained her and caused her vision to blur. As she placed a hand to block out the harsh glare. I see you finally returned to the world of the living. She groaned and weakly turned her head, catching sight of the familiar figure in green. Guan? She questioned quietly. Where am I? In the hospital. I thought that would be obvious, he said as he stood and walked over to the table by her bedside. He poured water into a cup and gently lifted her head as he brought it to her lips. Drink, was his simple command. She complied, drinking the whole glass very quickly. Guan placed the cup back on the table and walked back to his seat. How did I get here? She asked after a few moments of silence. That Uzumaki boy was the one who brought you in. Apparently he managed to arrive just as you collapsed, he answered. She turned incredulously to him. What? But they sent 7 Anbu after him, she said incredulously. Guan nodded. Indeed, each of them were also part of our former Mizukage's personal guard. He looked to her then. And he escaped without a single injury. That's impossible, not even you could do that. The only person who would have a chance at doing that would be Kisame. Guan nodded. The boy is powerful, remarkably so. Possibly stronger than even Kisame ever could be. You've got to be kidding me? Kisame was the strongest ninja ever to grace Kiri since the Shodai Mizukage. What could possibly make you think that? You would be quite impressed by the information one could gather by simply remaining in the shadows. He took a breath. He is apparently a Jinchuriki. What demon he houses I do not know. He was raised as a weapon from a very young age and took over the hidden leaf when the Sandaime Hokage died. He finished and stood as he began walking towards the door. Guan. Ginchiko called behind him, making him pause. I'm sorry, you and Hidetada never did get along, but he was still your brother and... Ginchiko. He interrupted firmly. Just tell me, what were his final words? She closed her eyes and smiled somewhat sadly. He asked me to fulfill his dream, you know, that old one our sensei stuck in his head. Really? Guan asked as his interest peaked. Interesting. How so? She asked. I don't assume you know why this Jinchuriki wants Kiri for himself, do you? For our land and our navy, which now controls practically the entire Eastern Sea. That may be what he told you, but no, the real reason he wants Kiri is because he wishes to unify the land, to conquer every hidden village. What? But that's ludicrous. She yelled but winced as spasms of pain ran through her body. Do you know why he wants to do this? She didn't speak. It was the last request of the Sandaime Hokage. She scoffed. Last I heard, the Sandaime was a peace-loving old man. Guess I heard wrong. The Sandaime's last wish was to bring peace to the entire land. That stopped the woman cold, not just Konoha, or Kiri but the entire land. He wants to end all of the wars. Guan paused. Therefore, in a way, serving this boy will help in fulfilling my brother's dream. He looked back over his shoulder at her. You can make your choice, whether to serve him, or defy him, but I think I've already made mine. Ginchiko. Meanwhile, Naruto sat in a meditative position in one of the many spare rooms of the cage residence. After the Mizukage's death, it only took one day to subdue the entire village of Kiri. A few insurgents and loyalists to the old regime had been driven out and had taken up refuge in the surrounding marshlands, but Mika, Hinata and Shibi would deal with them soon enough. Now all he had to do was remain in the area for a few days to firmly secure his place in the seat of power. He would assign Kakashi and a few Anbu to be the overseers. Keeping a reputable Junin presence here would work well to keep any power-hungry fool in line. He was broken out of his thoughts as soft thumps reached his ear. He looked to the side and saw a frog hopping towards him with a scroll on his back. A message from Jiraiya. The frog plopped itself down in front of him, untied the scroll from his back, placed it on the floor, waved once and poof. Was gone. Naruto blinked before he grabbed the scroll and unrolled it. So, he drawled. The slug and toad are coming to the mist. He paused for a moment, as if contemplating something. I wonder, Tsunade, what is it that you desire? ? It was 3 days later that Jiraiya and Tsunade finally arrived in Kiri. They could have arrived much sooner, but for some reason Tsunade had insisted to simply walk at a normal pace and take plenty of rests. Every time Jiraiya questioned her, she simply said that it had been a while since she had come around these parts and wanted to enjoy the scenery. When they finally arrived in Kiri, the two immediately noticed two things. Repairs were underway on many buildings and Hitaki Kakashi was standing as the gate guard ? You have got to be shitting me ? Jiraiya and Tsunade muttered to themselves. It had merely been 5 weeks, there was no conceivable way that he could have subdued Kiri already. Ah, Jiraiya-sama, Tsunade-sama. Kakashi greeted lashingly as he waved, never removing his eye from his book. Naruto-sama has been expecting you. He spoke as he turned a page. Jiraiya nodded, still slightly dumbfounded. Kakashi, where is Naruto now ? He should be in the tower, beginning his administrative duties. Jiraiya blinked with an expression of disbelief mixed with a kind of, holy shit, look before he turned to Tsunade. Well, let's get going, now's a good time as any. She nodded, and the two remaining Sannin entered the village of Kiri. When Tsunade and Jiraiya entered the tower, they didn't even bother to speak to the administrative workers as they made a beeline for the strongest chakra source in the building. They entered the Mizukage's former office and found Naruto speaking to a large man wearing green robes. Very well, Guan. The man bowed his head once before he turned and walked past the Sannin. As he passed Tsunade, however, his eyes shifted. She looked at him from the corner of her eyes and caught his gaze. His gaze was completely blank as he walked past her without a single word. Ah, Jiraiya. Naruto's hollow voice brought her out of her muses. She turned her eyes onto him, blood-red robe and hood, armor as black as midnight and metallic face mask. His voice dead, hollow and void of any emotion. His eyes hidden in as much shadow as the rest of his being. Her eyes narrowed. This was the man Jiraiya believed would bring peace to the world ? She was brought out of her contemplation by Jiraiya's voice. And sir, she agreed to come here and meet with you. I see. Naruto spoke as he turned to her. Well then, Tsunade, you wish to speak, so speak. She squared her shoulders. I would like some privacy for this conversation. Why don't we go someplace else ? She seemed to think for a moment. As a matter of fact, I know the best place. You do ? Jiraiya questioned. She smirked as she turned to him. You know the place too, Jiraiya, it's where we camped out during our first mission here. Ah, Jiraiya said as he remembered and nodded. Only one question, Tsunade. I was told you had an assistant, Shizune was it ? Where might she be ? Tsunade shrugged. She didn't want to come, and decided to wait for me back at the village Jiraiya found us in. If I decide to join you then I'll call her. Naruto paused and after a long moment nodded. Very well then, let us leave. The three walked through the village, watching as the people worked. Tsunade caught many looks of fear pass over the villagers' faces as they laid eyes on Naruto, as well as some looks of anger from others dressed in black garb, no doubt families burying their loved ones. She closed her eyes. The three continued their walk until finally they came to a clearing overlooking a small 10-foot rock face. Tsunade walked over to a tree which had 4 names carved into it. Jiraiya had done it. Jiraiya, Tsunade Orochi team and their sensei Sarutobi. Greatest ninja team ever. She closed her eyes and looked to the sky with a slightly pained expression on her features. How did it come to this ? I remember that. Jiraiya's voice brought her out of her thoughts. She turned and looked at her teammate's bittersweet expression. She smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. Jiraiya sensed her tense and turned to look at her. Sooner, he was cut off by her whisper. I'm sorry. He tried to pull back but it was too late. She tightened her grip on him and spun him around so his back was facing her. She charged some chakra into her fingertips and taped the base of his neck before she delivered a solid kick to his ribs, sending the Sannin flying, crashing right into a tree. She closed her eyes and prayed that she hadn't hit too hard before she turned to look at the blonde Jinchuriki, who seemed as impassive as ever at Tsunde's actions. She sneered at that. Bastard probably doesn't even care. What is it that you desire, Tsunde ? He questioned simply. She scoffed. To stop you and your idiocy right here and now. He shook his head as he unsheathed one of his swords. No, Tsunde, what is it that you truly desire? The desire hidden, in the dark pit of your soul. Two figures leapt down from the rock face, revealing Akina and Shizune as they flanked the Jinchuriki, both bearing kunai and shuriken. Jiraiya struggled to stand, but that tap to the neck had completely messed up his nervous system. He couldn't move properly. Damn it, that's why she wanted to walk. She wanted for them to get here first and be ready to ambush him. I should have seen this coming. Naruto craned his head to look at Shizune. The woman held a determined gaze, but there was a definite underlying fear and nervousness. She may know what to do, but this was probably one of her first true combat experiences. He then turned to the other uninvited guest, Akina. The girl looked at him with a hatred he had not seen in any before her. Possibly even more than Sasuke's hatred for Itachi. It was then that he locked eyes with her and time seemed to freeze as his eyes flashed red without his consent. Unbeknownst to anyone, QB smirked from behind the bars of his cage. Yes. He began chuckling then, at first slow and menacing, then blowing up into a mad laugh of bloodlusting glee. His red eyes glowed in the darkness of the seal. Soon, Naruto, soon I'll feel your bones crunching between my teeth. Once I'm done with you, not even the Shinigami will find the pieces. One who betrays must expect betrayal. Naruto spoke lashingly before he snapped his fingers. A massive broad sword flew through the air, making both girls leap back to avoid it. Before the sword could hit a tree, an individual in green caught the blade by the hilt. Guan, you deal with those two, I will deal with Tsunde. The bearded man nodded before he adjusted his grip on the blade and began walking towards Shizune and Akina. The blonde girl appeared to want to go after Naruto but held herself back in favor of helping Shizune. Naruto walked forward as his sword glinted in the flickering sunlight that filtered down through the treetops. Red chakra pulled at his feet and encased his form, its fiery embrace as his eyes glowed a deep red beneath his hood. If my death is what you desire, Tsunde, then you'll have to come and take it. She sneered at him. I don't know if you can even be called a man or if you really are a demon anymore, Uzumaki. But even if you are a demon, it doesn't matter. I'll do whatever I have to do to stop this ambition of yours here and now. Naruto stopped and felt an unfamiliar feeling of anger bubbling in his chest. For some reason, being called a demon irritated him. For what reason, he did not know. People had said it, both in and out of the battlefield for as long as he could remember. He never cared then, why should he now ? He then remembered Hayit, that gripping pain in his chest as he stared at his unmoving form. Perhaps that was why. Because before, he cared for nothing, he could kill, maim, murder, it didn't matter. But, now for the first time in his life he had felt guilt, true guilt over his actions. Demons did not feel guilt, therefore, he could not be one. He looked into her eyes, his blood-red orbs seemingly piercing her. I'll let you in on a secret, Tsunde. Uzumaki Naruto is nothing but a man. And with that quiet declaration the blonde rushed the slug Sannin. Tsunde reared her fist back and with a display of her superhuman strength she punched Naruto's incoming sword, shattering it into a million pieces. Naruto took it in stride as he used the swing to gain momentum to spin around and deliver a roundhouse kick to the slug Sannin. Tsunde blocked the kick with one arm and pushed him off. Naruto, who had been moving in a clockwise motion, now moved counterclockwise. He brought his foot down harshly, digging it into the gravel to stop his momentum as he charged a fist with so much chakra it glowed with blue flames as he slammed it into her gut, using the momentum to add to the impact. Tsunde felt the air leave her lungs painfully quick, but held her ground and delivered her own punch to the boy's face. Naruto quickly moved an arm to block as best he could, but she broke through his defense like a wrecking ball through plaster as she hit his jaw dead on the spot. Naruto flew through the air several dozen yards and through a tree before he was able to right himself in mid-air and land on the next tree with his legs. The wood groaned against the pressure of his impact. He used the tree to jump, bounding over the treetops as he formed his hand seals. Before he cupped his hands in front of his face and breathed out a massive stream of flames towards the woman. Sunid reared back her fist and punched the ground. The shockwave of her fist made the earth rise in front of her in massive spikes which blocked the flames. When the orange glow died down indicating the attack had finished, she kicked each earth spike shield, sending them flying towards the airborne Jinchuriki. Naruto unsheathed his last blade and began swinging, sending multiple wind blade to cut the stones into small pebbles before they even reached him. As the last stone approached him, he used his wind chakra to spin him around, giving him momentum as he kicked the stone back to her, only to have it shatter into a million pieces as Sunid reared back her fist and punched it. Ha! Was Shizun's cry as she appeared behind the man in green, coming down with a brutal axe kick to the junction of his neck and collarbone. Guan took the blow without so much as a flinch before he grabbed the girl by her ankle and swung her around, slamming her into Akina, who had been approaching his side, intent on stabbing him in the ribs with a kunai. Both girls were sent flying back and skidded to a stop. When they looked back, Guan had finished swinging his sword in an upward strike, dragging it across the ground, leaving a jagged trench in its wake. When the swing was completed, a blue streak of lightning continued its path, forking across the ground towards the two females as it tore the earth apart from the force. Move! Shizun yelled as she kicked Akina away and leapt up just in time to avoid the attack. Akina, though slightly shocked by her sudden movement, recovered quickly and rolled in order to get to her feet. She wasted no time and formed her hand seals. Kaiten, Ryuka, she yelled, releasing multiple fireballs towards the green-clad shinobi. Guan placed his broadsword in front of him and began spinning it with one hand. It got faster and faster, and when the fireballs finally reached him, the speed and wind created by the blade simply dispersed the flames like candle lights. He ended the spin, falling in a defensive stance, grasping the hilt with both hands, the tip of the sword angled towards the floor in front of him. Akina growled, the sound coming out strangely animalistic for a human, before she took out two kunai and rushed him. Guan waited for her to be in range before he swung his blade horizontally. She fell flat on her back and skidded across the ground, avoiding the blade and trying to kick his feet out from under him. Guan leapt over her in a cartwheel motion. Akina dug her hands into the soil, stopping herself, and then did a perfect backflip while her back was to him, using just the strength of her arm, in an attempt to kick the Kiri swordsman. Guan blocked both her legs above his head with his forearm and then delivered his own kick, this one headed for the girl's chest since she was upside down. Akina placed her free arm in the way in time for it to take the brunt of the attack. The attack still sent her rolling forward, coming to a stop as she slammed harshly into a tree trunk. Guan turned and placed his sword in the way of several senbon Shizun had launched from a hidden device in her sleeve. One look at them and he could tell they were poisoned. He removed the blade from his field of vision in time to see Shizun's foot before it connected solidly with his face. He fell back and placed his free hand on the ground. He heaved himself up and kicked Shizun in the chest, sending her staggering back and using her to gain enough momentum to backflip to his feet. He then turned, swinging his sword in an arc to his other opponent who had recovered. Akina used two kunai to block the strike as best she could, but was still sent stumbling back. Guan turned again to face Shizun, swinging his sword again. Shizun stepped into the swing, wrapped her arm around his, holding him in place, and delivered a brutal headbutt, knocking the Kiri swordsman into a daze just as Akina moved in and stabbed his forearm, making his grip on his sword slacken enough for her to yank it out. Shizun formed a chakra scalpel in her hand and reared it back in preparation to cut the man's heart. Guan recovered from his daze and caught her wrist in time to stop her. He raised his leg and kicked her off of him. Akina held Guan's massive sword with both hands, struggling to even lift the damn thing. The blasted hunk of metal weighed a ton to her. Just why the hell did these bastards have to carry weapons that were so heavy? Shizun spoke to her. You know fire jutsu right? At Akina's nod she continued. Good. Take the sword somewhere and melt it. We can't afford to have him get it back, and you're no good with that heavy thing weighing you down. I'll hold him off. Akina looked like she was ready to protest, but a glare from Shizune made her nod and rush off as fast as she could to get some distance between herself and Guan. Shizune looked back to the large man and took her fighting stance. It was the standard medic taijutsu stance, strong offense when used in conjunction with chakra scalpel, but weak defense. Guan recognized the stance and retaliated by taking his own offensive stance. Do not make me fight you, girl, I do not wish to kill you. Shizune didn't say anything before she formed her hand seals. Dokugiri, she yelled before releasing a huge cloud of poison that blanketed the area. Naruto grunted in pain as his back was slammed against one of the trees. He craned his head to the right just in time to avoid Tsunade's fist, letting it hit the tree and promptly topple it over. Naruto wasted no time and delivered punches to her stomach in rapid succession, followed by an uppercut which snapped the woman's head up, leaving her chest wide open. He reared back his left gauntlet-covered hand, forming a bright sphere of swirling chakra. Tsunade, still dazed by the hits, couldn't properly defend herself before he slammed the Rasengan right into her chest, sending her flying back, spinning with the same motion of the sphere before she hit the floor, skipping over it like a pebble over the surface of a lake before her back slammed harshly against the rock face with a sickening crunch. She fell to the ground on her hands and knees, one arm clutching her chest as she hacked up torrents of blood. She wheezed when she breathed, the sound coming out strained, strangled and painful. Naruto was almost certain she would die shortly. Until the diamond-shaped seal on her forehead pulsed and purple seals formed all around her body, Naruto could hear the bones snapping back into place and hear as organs, flesh, tendons, and tissue repaired itself nearly instantly. The slug Sannin stood, green chakra forming a hazy mist all around her. She placed her hands in a seal and spoke. Initial gate. Kai. As she yelled out the last word, her muscles seemed to expand for a moment before compressing back to their normal size. She then formed another seal. Naruto, knowing that he had to stop this now, before she did any more, drew on the Kyuubi's chakra and rushed forward at incredible speeds. Heel gate. Kai. Her chakra instantly seemed to replenish itself and go beyond what she had even started with. Naruto unsheathed his blade and pushed wind chakra into it as he cupped his free hand in front of his face mask, his eyes turning red as he began to call on more of the fox's chakra. Life gate. Kai. Katon. Zugoku, she yelled, releasing the third gate as Naruto blew out a stream of flames which was immediately combined with the wind chakra in his blade. Her skin turned red and her chakra output nearly quadrupled, her hair whipped around her wildly, undoing itself from its normal pigtails as she dug her fist into the ground and lifted it up, again using the earth as a shield to block out the flames. She leapt away just as the ground she had been using as a shield exploded as Naruto tore through it like rice paper. Two claws of red chakra rushed out of the dust and debris. They grabbed her roughly by the shoulders and began to burn her terribly, only for her to replace herself with a log. Naruto spun around in time to dodge Tsunade's axe kick. He stumbled as the earth shook and gave way beneath him as her foot connected. Tsunade took the opportunity it presented. Grabbing him by the collar of his cloak, she reared her fist and punched the blonde Jinchuriki as hard as she possibly could. Pieces of his cloak were torn off and gripped firmly between her fingers as the blonde was sent flying, slamming into the rock face hard enough to have it crumble on top of him in a small landslide. Everything was silent for a moment before Tsunade heard a deep growl as red light could be seen between the cracks of the earth piled over of the Jinchuriki. The very earth began to shake and Tsunade felt a brief moment of fear before she smothered it completely. She rushed forward, intent on killing the boy before he could finish whatever he had planned. She didn't get more than 2 steps before hundreds of red chakra claws exploded from the ground all around her. They rose into the air, going far beyond the trees before they came crashing down on her like a great tidal wave of bloodlusting power. Tsunade dodged as best she could, using her enhanced speed to help her, but even she couldn't keep up with it and soon received 3 gashes from her left shoulder to her right hip as one of the claws slashed her. Then another slashed her across her back, then another and another. The slashes healed almost as quickly as they appeared, but they still caused terrible pain even after they were healed. When the chakra claws ceased their slashing and instead formed into one huge mass which began burning her whole, she did the only thing she could think of. Kuchio's no Jutsu. A massive cloud of smoke blanketed the entire forest and the next thing that was seen was a massive slug. Tsunade gasped in relief. Tsunade. The slug spoke, taking in her state. Are you alright? Tsunade didn't have time to answer before another cry was heard. Kuchio's no jutsu. Another smoke cloud, this time revealing Manda. The slug seemed to hiss out the name like a cursed poison. Katsuyu. Manda snarled and then looked at his summoner, who stood atop his head, only this time, his cloak was missing from his shoulders, revealing his bright blonde hair as his red eyes glared at the medic with as much contempt as he could muster. Two flaming red tails of chakra thrashed behind him. Naruto looked to the snake and spoke. I want them in pieces. Manda smirked. He was going to enjoy this. Shizune charged the shinobi. As she got in range, she attempted a spin kick only for Guan to duck under it with ease. She then followed it up with a sweep kick, but he dodged that one as well. She would have attacked again, if the air hadn't left her lungs as the man slammed the back of his fist into her ribs with an air of effortlessness about him. Shizune, uncharacteristically cursed before she attempted to backhand him in the face. He caught her fist and twisted her arm behind her back. Shizune craned her neck back to be face to face with the older ninja. Guan barely had time to catch her smirk before Fukumakuchi Hari. The green-clad man screamed and punched her hard in the face as 3 small needles stabbed his left eye. He fell to one knee and held one hand over his eye as it bled freely. Shizune smirked, wiping some blood from the corner of her mouth as she stood. Those needles weren't poisoned due to the danger of having them hidden in her mouth, but they had served their purpose. She moved fast and charged the larger man, coming in with a flurry of kicks and punches. Guan couldn't defend properly due to the fact that his eyes naturally tried to follow her movements, causing him even greater pain as the needles scrapped against the inside of his socket. Shizune then broke through his guard and used chakra scalpel to cut the tendons in his left arm. With a cry of rage, the older man took out a kunai and with speed brought on by pain and anger he plunged it into her stomach, causing the woman to stop and cough blood. Before she could do anything, he left the kunai in her stomach and then kicked it in deeper, burying it up to the hilt and making her fall onto her back as she coughed up more blood. Guan again fell to one knee. He took out another kunai and looked at it with his one good eye. He looked momentarily torn before his features hardened. Shizune watched in horrified fascination as the man plunged the kunai into his own eye and cut it out. Blood sprayed everywhere. It fell down the left side of his face freely, caking his beard in the red liquid as it pulled at his feet. She got to her knees and with a forceful pull took out the kunai from her stomach. She groaned as she threw the bloody weapon away and took deep breaths in an attempt to help concentrate on healing the injury. Guan also took deep breaths as he began tearing off some of his robes and used them as a makeshift bandage to cover his eye. Finally, after almost a minute of regaining his composure, he stood and began walking over to Shizune's prone form, who was almost done with her healing, but not quite finished. He stopped in front of her and stared into her eyes. They held fear, but also determination and anger, both things necessary for a ninja. Not bad, young one, he admitted before he kicked her. Shizune managed to cross her arms in front of her in time to block the attack but was still thrown back, several feet by the force of his blow. Guan moved to step forward again before something crashed into his side, nearly tackling him to the ground. He regained his bearings in time to see the snarling features of the other girl. He leaned his head to the right, dodging her fist, which held surprising amount of force, before he lifted his leg, placed it on her stomach and chest and pushed her off. He stood and watched as the girl righted herself in midair and landed, her form hunched over as her hair covered her eyes. He could tell that something had changed about her. Katsuyu's form seemed to bulge for a moment before she released a huge stream of acid towards the snake, hitting it dead on. When the snake's melting form could be seen clearly, it revealed nothing but its shed skin. Manda exploded from the earth behind the slug, wrapping itself around it, only to have Katsuyu separate into hundreds of other, smaller slugs and reform out of its grip. As the slugs reformed, Naruto realized Tsunade isn't on her head. He barely turned around in time to see Tsunade's form as she ran up Manda's back, heading straight towards him. He ducked under her fist, then placed his right shoulder against her stomach and grabbed her extended fist with his left hand. He flipped her over his shoulder, sending her clear off Manda's head. He did not, however, expect her to grab his collar and pull him down with her, sending them both spiraling down to the forest floor. Both were snarling as they continued exchange fists and kicks in midair. Each block and impact hurt both of them. Such close proximity was burning Tsunade terribly. At this rate, her seal of rebirth would only last for about another 2 minutes or so. And each blow Naruto blocked would still break the bones in his arms, only to have them heal in seconds due to the fox's chakra. Only difference between them was that his source of healing was virtually endless, while hers had a limit. He would outlast her, then he would kill her. Not Argaran was the mantra the young blonde-haired girl chanted in her head as exchanged attacks with the Kiri shinobi. She swerved to the left to avoid a downward swing he delivered with his kunai. She extended her left arm and placed it over his neck in a headlock which made him arch back. Then she took her right arm and wrapped it around his extended arm so his elbow was against her rib cage. She then pulled, hoping to break his arm. Guan grunted and grit his teeth as he fought against her hold, then using a burst of chakra he broke free, elbowing her in the stomach and then backhanding her in the face, sending her sprawling. She hit the floor hard but rolled to her feet. She snarled on all fours as she glared at him, and then let her eyes travel to the falling figure of Naruto as he fought with Sannin. "I won't let you win again," was her silent promise as she closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they had changed from her clear blue to a deep crimson red with an animalistic. Naruto caught Sannin's fist and reared his claws back, ready to tear her apart, but suddenly he felt pain, deep burning pain, as if he had unleashed 4 tails of Kyuubi's chakra. The red chakra shivered and seemed to fade for a moment before it exploded everywhere, changing from a focused 2 tails to a hazy cloud of red chakra. Naruto bit back a scream of pain. Sannin again seized the opportunity and reared back her fist, punching him again and sending him flying down to the earth. He flipped in mid-air and landed on all fours. A massive dust cloud picked up in his wake. He tried to stand but fell to one knee and gripped his stomach, over the area where the seal was. He hissed in pain. Gritting his teeth he opened a single eye and for the first time in a long time, felt true surprise. There in front of him, was the girl Sannin had called Akina, hunched over like an animal, a single red chakra tail whipping behind her. Above her, the head of a fox formed from the chakra. It looked straight at him, piercing his red eyes with its own before it smiled darkly. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.